Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tudor Price. I'm your host for this afternoon. We're just going to give it another minute or two because this was obviously published quite late, and therefore we might have a few people who are quickly jumping onto the call. So we're just going to give it a few more minutes while we sit in silence, just waiting for everyone else to join, and then we'll kick off properly. My name is Tudor Price. I look after the Kent and Medway Growth Hub, which is a government-funded business support organisation, and our job is to know what funding, what support is available in your local area. And I'm going to be your host for this afternoon. We are also joined by Nathan Martin, who is the Principal Trading Standards Officer for Kent Trading Standards. And we're also joined by Duncan Haynes, who is the Environmental Protection Team Leader for Mid-Kent. Now, we've got a couple of links in the chat area, so I'll just draw your attention to the chat field. We've got Trading Standards Advice Line. Now, this is, you can submit questions and request callbacks from Trading Standard advisors. That's your first link there. You've got, ignore the ones at the very top. These are the ones that are sort of about halfway down the page at the moment. And then there's the Kent and Medway Growth Hub, whom I represent, and that is our website address, where you've got telephone numbers and email addresses if you want to contact us. And we also have advisors available to talk around the funding and the business support side of things. The other thing to mention here really is there is a lot of change. I think all of us have been trying to get to grips with the national lockdown that's been implemented, and the news, as you know, only came out the other weekend. So with the best intentions, we will be limited as to some of the more tricky and technical questions, but we will do our utmost to try and make sure that we try and provide you with what we know so far. And if we don't know it, then it's probably not been written yet. So we will then try and make sure we get an answer to those questions that we couldn't answer here today, and we'll try and share that with you post this event. Because there are so many of you on this call, we're not going to invite you to speak for yourselves. We're going to keep you on mute throughout. But we would invite you to post your questions in the chat area, which, if you haven't used Zoom before, if you move your mouse down to the bottom of the screen, you'll see a selection of icons. One of them looks like a think bubble. You click on that, it will open a chat area to your right, and then you can just type your questions in there. And if my multi-skilling holds out, I shall be able to pick up the questions and ask as we talk our way through this next session. So without further ado, let me ask our two guest experts to just introduce themselves. So Nathan, over to you first.
Hello all, thank you very much for coming. Blimey, is that me getting feedback there?
I'm afraid it is. We're all good out here.
All right, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nathan Martin. I'm the Principal Trading Standards Officer for Kent County Council Trading Standards. I work in the Business Advice Services team. It's a team which is completely separate from enforcement, and it exists solely to work with businesses trying to help you get things right before they become problems. As such, myself and my team are people you can talk to if you have an issue. As far as coronavirus goes, the trading standards involvement is to advise and ultimately enforce, if we have to, on business closures. So that's what I'll be answering questions on.
That's great, Nathan. Thank you very much indeed. Duncan.
Hi everyone. My name's Duncan Haynes. I'm the Environmental Protection Team Leader for Mid-Kent Environmental Health Services, covering with my colleagues Tunbridge Wells, Maidstone and Swale areas. Both our food and our environmental protection teams have been and will be involved in both the enforcement and monitoring of closed premises, and also around the wider social distancing and COVID security legislation. Like trading standards, we will certainly try to help you as much as we can in trying to make sure that you're compliant and that you can comply. We do have a dual role in that, you know, we don't have a another team to one to do advice and one to do enforcement. We sort of have both roles, but we do that in a sort of a tiered way. So we'll try and advise you, but ultimately have an enforcement role as well.
That's great, Duncan. Thank you very much indeed. Now, ordinarily, none of this is ordinary at all. In the past or the preceding months, as Nathan pointed out, trading standards traditionally deal with sort of enforcing closure and sort of the rules around that, and environmental health will then work on social distancing guidelines and that sort of thing. Obviously, in this national lockdown, it's all about closure and about who can open. Luckily, Duncan has been very closely involved in some of that work as well, so he's very experienced and well versed in this particular topic, which is why he's here. But we were going to try and attempt to answer as many questions as we can in the hour that we have. All of you that registered have already submitted some questions, so we're going to start with a few of those first. I'll be sort of splitting them between our two speakers, and of course at the same time keeping a track on the questions which are flying in already. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, let's get started. So dog grooming is a term that keeps popping up quite a lot at the moment. This looks like, so I think now, barbecue pudding says dog grooming. Who's got dog grooming? You're going to handle that one. This is, can dog groomers following COVID secure policies open? Question mark.
Yeah, I'll cover that. We've had many questions come in about dog grooming, so I think it's a really good place to start. DEFRA have now provided some guidance to trading standards officers, so we have clarity on this subject. Dog grooming businesses can open. There is an exception in the law that says consumers can leave their home to take their dogs to be groomed for welfare purposes. I know there was a question that flashed up about what do they mean by welfare purposes. Unfortunately, that hasn't been clarified, and I'm not a dog owner myself, so I can't particularly tell you chapter and verse what welfare purposes is, but I would imagine it's something like getting soiled with feces or claws that are becoming dangerous, so if they could hurt themselves, that sort of thing. I think you are going to have to apply some sort of common sense for that, but regardless, that applies to why consumers are allowed to leave their home. As far as dog groomers are allowed to go, you are allowed to open. Everything needs to be by appointment only. You should have secure handover of the animal, ideally keeping the consumer completely off of the premises, so they shouldn't go onto the premises. Everything should be sort of cleaned down before and after. Anything like leads or anything like that that you use should all be cleaned. But you can open, you can continue to do your work. The government specifically says you can go to people's homes to collect the animals, and mobile groomers can still work, whether that is they have their own sort of grooming salon that they take to people and have the animals come into that is allowed. And also you can go into people's homes to groom their animals for them. That's also allowed, but you need to be very strict on all of your sterilization, use your PPE, make sure you social distance, all that sort of thing. So you have to be COVID secure about how you do it, but you can continue to operate your business.
It's really helpful, Nathan. I think that's going to come as a great relief to many businesses that are in that particular industry. On the same topic, there's a question there from Andy Schoolidge around dog trainers continuing to run group puppy classes in the numbers limited to 5 clients plus me as a trainer. Do you have any sort of information on that at all?
This one, I'm afraid I can't give a straight answer to. There has been nothing that has specifically come out with guidance from DEFRA or anything on dog trainers. Duncan might be aware of something, but I am not on this one. I haven't seen anything in the legislation that would allow that sort of thing to go on at the moment, because certainly if we look at similar things like stables and all that sort of thing, they are closed for the purposes of running classes and training animals and all that sort of thing. So I don't see why that situation will be different just because the animal is a dog or a different type of animal. So I don't personally think that can be done. Duncan, I'd invite you to comment if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think you're right. I can't see anything in the schedules of businesses that can be open that would cover dog training. And I think the parallels you draw with stables are really good. And until we get some specific guidance or legislation, then my personal opinion would agree with yours in that it's not something that can continue.
Okay.
Duncan, while we've got you talking, and you mentioned the word stables, there's a question from John: riding schools are not listed as businesses which are required to close. is it still okay for them to continue offering riding tuition to clients with the usual sanitisation and social distancing measures? From what we're saying, they're to close or not to close?
Well, go on, Duncan.
Duncan first, and then I'll come back to you, Nathan.
I was going to say my take on it would be that lessons cannot continue. Stables are specifically listed as a premises that has to close, apart from for the welfare and exercise of the horses. So again, my take on it would be that you can't continue to do riding school lessons.
Nathan, did you want to add to that?
No, Duncan has said exactly the same thing that I was going to say. Stables are specifically mentioned as having to close, other than to sort of maintain your animal, that sort of thing, the personal care of the animal. Riding schools would come under that, I'm sure. So I think they do have to close.
Absolutely. Okay, that's fine. I understand. We've got a couple of questions around restaurants, pubs in particular. So on the restaurant side of things, takeaways. So I've got a couple of questions, and I'll put two, and this is going to come to you first, Duncan. So around, where was it now? I just saw it here a second. We're a microbrewery and tap room. This is from Linda. Based on a rural farm, if we sell pints as takeaways, can they be drunk elsewhere on the farm? And a similar question really is around, can we accept walk-in orders for takeaways? This is from a firm in Snodland. Duncan, I've got you marked down, pubs and restaurants.
Okay, so my understanding of the rules is that for alcohol, it has to be pre-ordered, either day or night. It has to be pre-ordered, and it has to be collected and taken off the premises. So, and the customer cannot enter the premises when they collect their alcohol. So, no, I don't think you could collect it from the brewery in a pint and take it to somewhere else on the farm to drink it. I think you have to take it away and to take it home. And the other part of the question was about...
Yeah, there was a principle, I think, remember that one before when we had lockdown measures about people sitting outside on benches drinking the alcohol they just purchased.
Yeah.
You know, in the shop.
I imagine that this has been
trying to stop that, I guess.
I imagine that this has been designed to prevent that.
Yeah.
What was the other half of the question?
Just a general takeaways question. It's around accepting walk-in orders for takeaways.
You can take walk-in orders during the daytime for food and non-alcoholic drinks, and that's, I think, from 0500 to 2200, but it still must be taken away. And after but if there's any alcohol within that order, then that has to be pre-ordered and collected or delivered only, and the customer cannot enter the premises. After 2200, both food and drink must be pre-ordered and collected, and the customer cannot enter the premises. There isn't anything in there that says it has to be pre-paid for, just pre-ordered. But I guess that would be for the business to decide whether it wants to risk the order being placed and then the customer not turning up to collect it.
Yeah.
If they haven't prepaid.
Okay.
That would be my understanding of it.
Thank you very much, Nathan. I'm just going to come to you on some retail question, really specifically around. I've got a question from a computer, a mobile phone repair shop. Am I still allowed to carry out repairs on customers' devices? Repairs.
Well, repairs is going to be a service. They haven't specifically referred to that as a service that can continue. They talk about restricted and non-restricted services. If the premises is also a retail premises, then they can't be open, but they can be open for sort of click and collect deliveries, that sort of thing, where they just have that non-contact handover.
Oh, okay. So someone could bring their broken phone, leave it on a bench or on a table outside, and then come back and pick it up maybe a day later or something.
I think that would be reasonable. I haven't seen any advice which specifically references this, but I think if you had people weren't allowed in the shop, it was all arranged online by telephone or whatever, you had that non-contact handover where everything was cleaned before and after, I think that is probably reasonable until we get guidance to say one way or another. Interestingly, if he was doing that service, if he was going into somebody's home and servicing their laptop or whatever in their home, then that would still be permitted, because he's providing that sort of service where he has to go into somebody's home, but he'd have to be socially distanced, do a risk assessment, decide whether he needs PPE, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. We've just had a follow-up from Andy around the around his riding school, saying he's received an email from Helen Grant saying we could go ahead with small groups. I think the danger here is that there is a lot of information flying around. Some of it is incomplete. Trading standards and environmental health officers will be the ones that will be enforcing and sort of clarifying the law on this. So no pun intended, but I would like to think this is the horse's mouth as far as getting clarity is concerned. But again, we're not being dismissive here, Andy. This is, we're very keen to get this right for you. So we'll continue to look into it, and if we can get an answer, definitive answer, then we'll make sure we come back to you. Just staying with you for a second, Nathan, on retail. I've got a couple more retail questions. One is from Christopher Jones around, are sweet shops permitted to be open or considered to be non-essential? And also, if considered non-essential, are they permitted to offer a collection service as well as contactless delivery service? Sweets, I guess,
retail
collection service, click and collect.
If you just bear with me a moment, I'll just check the specific wording. I've got the document in front of me. I'll be able to give you the specific wording of what it talks about for food. Okay, so this is businesses that are permitted to stay open. Food retailers, including food markets, supermarkets, convenience stores, and corner shops. Now, I think even though it's only sweets, you can't say it's necessary to keep you alive. It talks about food retailers, and I don't think there's any argument that you're not a food retailer in that one. So, Duncan, do you have an opinion on that? I think it's personally quite clear from the wording.
Well, a food, yeah, sweets are a food.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a very sweeping definition.
Yeah,
it is indeed. Okay, thank you very much. And I have one more for you. This is around run mobility vehicles, supplying adapted vehicles to wheelchair users and disabled drivers. Can I still man my showroom as my clients are all in need of essential transport solutions?
it's a difficult one for me to say, because I understand that you're providing services to a vulnerable group, but the legislation itself is very, very specific that all vehicle sort of showrooms have to remain closed. Myself and Duncan discussed this one earlier on, and our opinion is that as a non-retail business that is specifically said on the schedule that you have to close, then you can't be open to the public. But you can still go the click and collect delivery route, but you wouldn't be able to do the normal things that are associated with selling a vehicle. So that one-on-one interaction, going through brochures together, having a test drive, when you hand over that car, giving that 20-30 minutes of interaction where you show them how everything works on the car. I don't think you could do any of that, but purely completing a transaction, somebody has purchased this and you're providing them with the goods, you could do that by the click and the collect route.
Okay. There was a question which I know we were discussing just before we came on now around community halls, and I think Duncan, you've got this one, I believe, is that right? So question here is, can our community hall remain open for supervised children's activities such as maths and language tuition, drama, dance, karate, and children's ballet, and Ofsted registered organisations under the new restrictions? And at the same time, I have a question from Assistant Clerk, run a COVID secure community hall and would like clarification on Regulation 18. Person responsible for community centre hall must ensure the community is closed, except where it is for the purpose of supervised children activities. I think this may be possibly the same question. Assistant Clerk, you might be in chat, in which case I've got the same question twice. But I think the difference here is specifically around the children's element to it, which I think we were discussing. Can you offer any illumination on this?
I'm just having a quick look at Regulation 18.
Well, we were we were having a little bit of a debate about this one, and certainly you can do the sort of maths, English, supervised children's classes, and we were a little bit less sure on the sort of more physical classes, the drama, the karate. Again, it's a really difficult one, and we have to, be honest that we don't know necessarily all of the detailed answers to the clarification questions. So you can certainly do some of it. The more sporty drama activities, we don't know. I would probably, if this came in to us as a local authority, I would probably want to take that away and take some advice on it.
Is there a guiding principle?
I don't know whether Nathan feels a bit more certain.
Is there a guiding principle that can be applied here for some of these? I appreciate, obviously, you're going to try and find the definitive answer on this situation, but is there a sort of a guiding principle that, if it's essential for the education development needs of a child, then that it would probably be okay, but again, clarity required. Is there anything like that would help the businesses that are on the call today, so that try and take something away from that in relation to sort of providing children's services?
The way I'm reading the legislation is it does seem to suggest that they are trying to limit the effect on children, so to continue their education options and to continue having them in physical activity. So there's things that are into the legislation, for example, which allow the use of indoor facilities such as indoor gyms, indoor leisure centres, that sort of thing, purely for supervised activities for children. So my personal take is that the legislation is slanted towards making sure that children are occupied and educated and maintain their physical fitness. So my personal view, and I would specify this is my personal view because we're so early in this.
Yes,
we haven't had guidance on it, and this is just our early interpretation. My early view is that physical activities supervised for children can still take place. Certainly that's quite clear where they're taking place in stuff like indoor gyms, indoor fitness centres, that sort of thing. It's slightly muddied with the community centre, but my personal take is that you would be able to do it in community centres. I think the exemption would apply to that. But like I say, that is my take on that one. And it could be that in the next day or two, we get clarification from central government to say, I'm completely wrong and you do have to close. But what I would say is if the situation changes and we get given clear guidance, then we will tell you the situation has changed and you need to close.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And I think, again, we've had this conversation before, Duncan, Nathan. No one is looking to try and come out with a big hammer and sort of fine you for having transgressed. This is very much a sort of a supportive environment. It's for the right reasons, and if you're not sure and you've made a mistake, a genuine mistake, then that's absolutely fine. As long as you comply going forward, there's not going to be any sort of repercussions to that. It's obviously the repeat offenders and intentional offenders that are looking to be sort of enforced.
Yeah, I mean, certainly with trading standards, I can't speak for environment health, but I believe it is the same for them. Our attitude is that we work with businesses. Yeah. If you're keen to get it right, we're keen to get it right. We'll do everything we can to assist you. Yeah. Excellent.
Another retail question, and this I think we came up in sort of past Q&As we've done. This is around, can cafes, this is Sharon, can cafes, coffee shops provide tables and chairs outside their premises for customers with purchased takeaway, providing the customers only sit with their family or support bubble? And I think there was a similar question here around what is defined as being the premises, because I think people just taking a takeaway and then sort of standing outside on the street. Is there any sort of guidance on this side of things?
You or me, Duncan?
Well, I could give it a go, and you jump in if you think I've got it wrong.
Yeah, sure.
My personal view on this would be that my view on this would be that my view on this would be that no, you can't, and no, that you should, no, you shouldn't, because you'd be encouraging people to gather, which would be an illegal gathering. and whatever, we had a lot of these problems in the first lockdown period, where actually the rules were clearer on sort of takeaway premises. But I don't think that you can provide tables and chairs for people. I think the intention is that people take their takeaway and they leave, not that they then sit around outside.
Yeah,
that's exactly my interpretation
the same thing,
as
Nathan.
well. Yeah, exactly my interpretation, and also
Good, we didn't plan
the
that one.
legislation. Well, but the legislation specifies as well, if you incidentally have things like park benches outside your place of business, anything like that, you should be taking steps to stop people congregating on those as well. So in the lockdown one, we were recommending that people tape off the benches, all that sort of thing, because they can't be doing anything that is going to encourage them to gather there.
There's just on the question around pre-ordering and click and collect. Does that have to be through a website, or can be just done over the phone? Is that something? Any specifications on that?
Any reasonable method is fine. I think the legislation specifies telephone, email / website and post, but I don't think anyone's going to be doing it by post.
Send a letter and a check to get your pint of beer. Yeah, you'd be ready for you by the time the lockdown's over. Okay, that's excellent. And I think we probably know the answer to this one because we may have covered it, but Hannah's asked a question about outdoor education, specifically forest schools. I'm thinking from what you've told us so far, that's going to be a yes, they can carry on.
The legislation, it might just be poorly worded. There might be a change on this one when guidance comes out, but the legislation refers to indoor facilities. So, for example, my son, who does American football on Sundays, his team can't meet because there's no provision in there for outdoor versions of kids getting educated and kids doing physical activity. It seems a bit crazy because the risk is higher if you're indoors than if you're outdoors. So I think personally there's a good chance that will be addressed in guidance or whatever. But based on what the legislation says, no, I don't think you can do it.
Hannah, I'm sure to raise your expectations there.
Rather perversely,
education, children, and okay, so we'll hopefully hear
it's rather
more
perverse that you seem to be.
I agree.
I was going to say, sorry,
it seems to be a bit perverse that you can. It seems that you could actually do indoors kids swimming lessons still, but you can't do outdoors. Again, my kids could theoretically go to swimming lessons on Saturday morning if the leisure centre hadn't decided to close of its own accord, but they can't go to rugby on Sunday, which is outdoors. So,
okay, just on that one. So I'm not mistaken. Question from Jenny Daniels here around parent, toddler, craft, and dance classes. Are they okay to continue? Because obviously they offer some social interaction and so forth. Guidance is a bit grey.
They would have to take place in one of the indoor facilities. If you just let me, I'll actually say what the legislation says here. Or I would if I could find it.
While we're doing that, just to give you a little bit of a heads up, we're going to be running a couple of polls at the end of this. One is around a future Q&A sessions, and one obviously feedback from today's session as well. But before we wrap, I will also just be sharing with you my information from the Kent and Medway Growth Hub around the financial support that's currently being made available. We've got some information through arrived yesterday, and I can share with you some of the details on that later on. But Nathan, have you managed to find your
it basically says the whole restricted business thing doesn't apply, or it wouldn't stop people running things in indoor gyms, fitness studios, indoor sports facilities, and other indoor leisure centres for the purposes of supervised activities for children. So it's very, very clear it's all inside.
Okay, and again, that holds with that principle you're saying. The idea is to try and minimise the impact it's having on sort of the children's development. That's really good. Okay. Question here came in earlier, really. This is from the automotive. As a business without premises, largely because we work for vehicle manufacturers on their own premises, would be eligible for a grant as our business has stopped. I can answer that later on, so I'll come back to that one. And showrooms. are they classed as non-essential retail? We sort of covered this with a car question earlier, but this is actually from a Windows company.
Yeah, my personal opinion, the retail side of it, no, you're non-essential retail. So you wouldn't be able to have those people coming in. You wouldn't be able to discuss measurements, show them around, anything like that. You'd still be able to operate your business, but it would have to move to distance means. So telephone, internet, email, that sort of thing. If you've made a sale and you're fulfilling the contract, so you have people that have to go into people's homes to actually fit those windows, that is all still permitted. So your workers, your people who are going to fit them can go in, but they have to maintain social distancing, minimize contact with things and people and all that sort of things. But no, the showrooms itself are going to be non-essential retail.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. Duncan, one for you around. This is from Sharon. I had a question from a local Airbnb who had an inquiry from a customer who wanted to stay due to work taking place on or close to their home. I'm aware that hotels can open for people travelling for work, but not sure if this would apply in this scenario. Duncan.
Okay, yeah, so hotels and hostels, you can stay open. So hotels and hostels can stay open if the person, for someone who is unable to return to their main residence, the accommodation is their main residence, moving house, attending a funeral, is isolating themselves, needs accommodation for the purposes of their work. So I would say in that scenario, if they need to stay in accommodation like a hotel or hostel, or I guess an Airbnb for the purposes of their work, then they would be allowed to do that.
Okay, that sounds promising. Good. Just going to do a follow-up question for Jemima. She was asking earlier around the one at a bike shop, and sort of you've answered that question in terms of sales and repairs, etc. But are they allowed to hire bikes to close groups from the same household? So that sort of idea of actually hiring bikes. So to some extent, it's a bit of a takeaway, isn't it? You turn up and you take the bike and you go. Any thoughts on that one?
I would say if you're a retailer selling bikes and you run a bike hire service from your premises, those people are already permitted to be on your premises. So you'd be able to run the bike hire normally. If you're dedicated bike hire, I again think you would have to close but move it online. So you can still run your business, but it's all arranged, telephone, email, website, or whatsoever, with contact-free handover. Because I don't think you can automatically assume that bike hire is the same as bike sales, because I'm presuming bike sales is to facilitate people being able to get to work and all that sort of thing, whereas bike hire, you're definitely moving into the leisure side of it there, because people don't normally hire a bike for 6 months so they can get to work. It's because they want to spend 4 hours on a bike or whatever.
Yeah, it's more of a tourism thing, I guess, really coming out from groups and stuff like that. Okay, I hope that's sort of giving you some more clarity. That probably not. I appreciate Jemima, but yeah, we'll continue to look at that for you. And Lisa Fraser just come back on the question around the B&B. So this is coming back to you, Duncan. Yes, but how do you differentiate those genuinely travelling for work? I suppose the onus would be on us, question mark. I assume then single person occupancy only. How do we feed them breakfast, dinner? What's your suggestions and advice? Because there's a bit of social distancing around that as well. So Duncan.
Yeah, certainly in terms of how can you tell whether they're genuinely travelling for work? I think that would be, the onus would be on you to take all reasonable steps to establish that they are staying with you for work. I can't imagine that you would have more than one person. You wouldn't be traveling with your family if you were traveling genuinely for work, or you probably wouldn't want to stop in the same room as your colleague if you were traveling, if you were only traveling for work. In terms of feeding them bed and feeding them breakfast, dinner, I think in the legislation, it talks about hotel catering facilities needing to be room service.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Hopefully that's provided some more clarity there. Okay, we've got some more questions coming in thick and fast here still. Oh, actually, there's Emma O'Halloran. I think, Emma, you're Visit Kent, aren't you, I believe, if I remember correctly? Yeah, Visit Kent, their website. Got some good information there around Tunbridge Wells Borough Council. Thank you very much, Emma. Yeah, they've got some good guidance on the Visit Kent website. They do a lot to support businesses in terms of some of their sort of guidance and advice around helping to sort of provide social distance breakfast and things like that. So well worth a visit onto their website. Okay. Back on the question. So this year, John's come back on the question around riding schools and can provide tuition. Stables are included in the list of businesses to close, but riding schools were removed. The two operations are different from stables, not usually offering tuition and not subject to local authority licensing or controls. I think probably, John, this is one of those ones where, to some extent, you may know a little bit more about your industry than obviously we do. But I'm still going to come back to Nathan and Duncan. Really, is there any more that we can add to what has been done here, or is this one we're going to have to come back to later on?
What I would say is the whole thing about riding schools. It does specifically mention riding schools, but it's in a list of examples. So, sorry. Just because stables, sorry, I will start that again. It mentions stables as a list of examples of types of places that have to close. That list is not exhaustive. So just because riding schools aren't on there, doesn't mean that they're allowed to open. It's like it says it includes all sorts of outdoor things on it. So what it actually says is outdoor sports centres or amenities, including water sports, stables, shooting and archery venues, etc., etc. So it uses stables as an example, but it is not limited to just stables. So I think riding schools would be included in that outdoor sports centres or amenities. Okay.
Just a couple of ones. Key cutting and shoe repairs, essential retailer?
I don't think that comes under hardware.
No.
So no, I don't think it is essential retail.
Okay. And
but again, you're left with the click and collect route, moving your business online.
Yeah. There was another one around the community farmers market. Can community farmers market allow traders to apply their essential food wares in a village hall where a village does not have a convenience store and has a sizable elderly population? So, yeah, obviously promoting the social value and the importance of it in terms of support for the local community, but specifically farmers market, essential food. And there was an earlier question, I think, around, just see if I can find it, yeah, bear with me, around specifically the Whitstable Farmers Market, keep trading, including non-food items in the Umbrella Centre Village Hall. I think it's the same person.
The farmers market stalls themselves, the ones that are essential retail, so those selling food and drink, hardware, etc., they would still be able to be open. There are only very few exceptions where community centres, which would include village halls, can stay open, and for the purposes of running a stall or whatever, that's not included on the reasons that village halls could open. So I don't think you could run that from the village hall. However, there's nothing, I don't think there's anything that would stop you having the stall in the car park, for example. The village hall is not allowed to close, but the stall itself is allowed to be open.
The village hall should be closed or is allowed to be open?
I don't think the village hall can be open for the purposes of running a stall.
That's fine. I think it was just a slip of the tongue there. That was all. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem.
But in lockdown 1, they clarified established markets and stuff. I haven't seen established market in this one. It might be something that I've missed, but I would just assume the fact that it is classed as essential retail means it can be open.
Duncan,
go on, Duncan.
Contribute there.
I was going to say in part 3 of the schedule, the businesses to remain open, number 33 is food retailers, including food markets. So
fantastic.
It's a difficult one whether or not you call your food market in the village hall. There's a bit of a crossover there, but food markets are definitely on the list of places to stay open.
Yeah, I know there's certain local village halls run through community fridges, community sort of food banks and stuff like that. I think there's a similarity there, isn't it, to the benefit it has to the local community, and sort of in some cases could be deemed to be essential. But yeah, it's very interesting, Greg. I can't remember. We did talk about. There was one question here which has come through from. It's around a carpet retailer with 3 stores in Kent. This is really one of those ones that I think probably will have to go up the chain here. This is around Carpet Right, and a couple of other large multiples are obviously open. And how does that square with a local retailer? Do you have an answer to that, or is that something that you still want to do some more legwork on?
There is more work that we have to do. I can give something though, just so people understand where we're coming from. Under lockdown 1, carpet shops and that sort of thing, they were deemed to be allowed to open after a lot of wrangling with central government. A key word that was used to justify them being open was the inclusion of homewares with hardware. Homeware has been removed now, which puts the argument for them being open on very, very dicey grounds. So we have decided that we're not going to say, insist that you have to close at this point. We are going to seek clarification, and we have asked central government to ASAP give us clarification on it. So I'm not going to tell you have to be closed at the moment. We're going to wait for government to give us advice, and at that point, when we know what they've said, then we'll advise people. So we have made a link available where people can put in their contact details. So if you have a question, if your business relates to carpets and such, put your contact details in there, and then when we get clarification, we will contact you to tell you what we've been told.
Okay, that's excellent, and I think that's perfectly understandable. And I think there will be lots of independent retailers that are feeling sort of slightly aggrieved when those situations occur. And I know from work that we've done before, Nathan and Duncan, those sort of inequalities are very vigorously pursued, and of course they don't always get satisfactorily resolved, but they are noticed and they will be sort of looked into in more detail. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm just going to take a few more questions. So if you've got anything we haven't covered yet, please do pop it into the chat there. I'm going to then sort of just give you a bit of an outline of the funding situation, because there's a few questions we've had earlier around grants and support over the next month, and I can share that with you. So, so Lisa's come back. So I could act as a food hub from my farm within the guidelines, adhering to social distancing as a pop-up farm shop. This was the one. This is the microbrewery, I think, wasn't it, earlier? Something like that. Is that right?
If you're gonna make the switch from being a farm to being a farm shop, okay, anyone can set up as a food business, but you need to be registered with the local authority. Duncan will be able to tell you more, as a food business. So I don't think you could just say, well, today I'm a food shop, and and therefore you can be open. If you're going to be a food shop, you have to do it properly. You have to apply for it. You have to get a hygiene inspection, all that sort of thing. I mean, I don't know too much more about it, Duncan. Would you be able to expand on that for me?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know whether it was you or me that froze there for a little while, but
may well have been me.
That you no, I'd advise that if you're going to do that, that you contact the local authority for your area, and talk to them about what you need to do for food registration. They'll be wanting to send you a food registration form, and for you to fill that in and send it back to them, for you to be able to operate as essentially then a food premises, or a food shop, which would, I guess, following your line of thinking, would make you a essential or a premises that is allowed to operate. I see you say you registered and have a 5-star certification. It depends if that changes, that if you're changing what you're doing, I would still speak to your local authority. If you've got a 5-star certification for selling beer, and you're going to add food to it, then you would probably need to change what you're registered as.
Okay, that's great. Duncan, just
would be,
trying
I
to,
think,
Duncan and Nathan, we're sort of cutting close on time. So I'm going to fire a few more questions. If we could cut through these, it'd be great. Question from Paul: wedding venues, are they allowed to conduct viewings by appointment only to a prospective couple? So it's not actually opening it up to the venue, but actually to conduct viewings. That comes under, I guess, venues and sort of hotels. So that you, Duncan? No, Nathan's taking a deep breath. Nathan?
well, it's a difficult one. Community, so conference, event centres, all that sort of thing, they are closed for events. My understanding is it is only places like churches and registry offices, etc., that are permitted to have wedding ceremonies at the moment. So you shouldn't. The fact that weddings can still take place doesn't automatically mean that wedding venues can have weddings operating on them. So I don't think they come under that exception that actually allows them to open. So on that basis, I don't think that you could have members of the public coming onto the premises to have that sort of interaction. I think you're in the same sort of situation as the showroom, where you're going in there to be shown things and measure up and all that sort of thing. I'm quite shaky on this one. I have to say it's a really difficult situation, and hopefully Duncan can bail me out, because if you've got some different thinking on this one, Duncan, I'd really like to hear it.
No, I think I agree with you. I mean, again, I'm not sure whether it's me that's losing internet because my kids are home and taking it all. But I did lose a little bit of what you were saying there. But I think that I don't think you could do that. Partly because then the people who are coming to see you would be breaking the reasons to be leaving the house rules, because it's not an essential reason for leaving the house. It doesn't fit with one of those reasons, and you'd be sort of encouraging them to do so.
Yeah.
So as hard as it is, and I really feel for all the wedding venues, I don't think that you can.
No, and I have absolute empathy. My wife's a wedding florist, so we live in that horror as well. Okay, two more questions here specifically, which have been on the list here for a little while. So one is around Big Jam Studios. They are, so professional music artists can still come to record at the studios as long as they're not in the same room as me. I can do this remotely with no problem, so technology is playing a part there. I just need confirmation this is okay. It seems bands can still rehearse here. Is that okay? Can studios open?
Yeah, I'm happy that that's an easy answer. For once, it's specifically covered. Sort of professional recording and productions continue to go ahead. So yeah.
Great, excellent. And perhaps still in the music vein, but more to do with retail, I guess. Really, question around, where is it now? 1 second. Musical instrument repair, probably covered by the answer to computer repair. So I think we talked about that earlier. Also rent instruments for long periods, which is probably not the same as bicycle rentals. Am I correct? So open for musical instrument repair. Is that okay?
Again, you're non-essential retail. You can't open for people to come in and out. Again, it's not specifically covered by the legislation, so we could get guidance to say that it's not permitted, but I think a completely contactless handover, all that sort of thing, would be permitted, or would certainly be reasonable, unless we get advice to the contrary from central government. So make sure it's all done online through Zoom calls or whatever, telephone, email, and make sure when you do your handover, there's no contact, everything is sterilised before and after.
Brilliant. Okay, we're going to stop the questions there because we seem to be sort of marching through time very quickly. Just punching a number into the live chat that'll become relevant in a minute. I can't multitask. There we go. Brilliant. Now, that phone number is the COVID-19 helpline for the Growth Hub, and you can put a call into that number tomorrow now, and you'll get a request a call back from a business advisor who can tell you a little bit about the grant funding that is currently out there. The clearest way of doing it is everyone is aware of furlough. formerly the official name is the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, CJRS. Furlough is back in exactly the same form that it was, 80% claimed by through HMRC through the payroll. Okay, try and ignore some of these other things you heard about the JSS job support scheme. They're all sort of parked for the moment because we've gone back to so furlough is available. The other two grants that will be available imminently, and one is called the Local Restrictions Support Grant (brackets closed). Catchy title. If you remember, it's LRSG closed, and it's important that you make a note of these particular names. LRSG closed. That will be connected, or that will be a grant, fixed grant that will be related to the rateable value of your commercial property. That will be paid out via local authorities, and I won't go into the full breakdown of how much is there at the moment, but essentially it will be open to any sector. If your business is required to close as a result of public health guidance, then you will be entitled to that LRSG closed. Okay, and it's not sector specific. In the past it was just retail, tourism, hospitality. This is open to any. As long as your business has been instructed to close, then you'll be entitled to claim for that grant. And again, it's based on rateable value, and the local authority will be handling that. Don't ring them yet. They're not ready for you. Literally, this guidance came out yesterday. They're just working up the web pages, the application forms, so please don't call them just yet. The third relevant grant is what's called the Additional Restrictions Grant (brackets discretionary). Now, this is a pot of money that's being given to local authorities in addition to the LRSG, and that will allow the local authority to make grant payments to non-rateable properties or businesses or other areas of significant economic impact. So discretionary is the key word there, and again, the local authorities are currently drawing these up to try and work out. So that is the Additional Restrictions Grant (brackets discretionary). And the reason discretionary has been added in there is to make sure you will know exactly what it is in terms of how there will be variations from local authority to local authority, because they've been given complete flexibility and mandate to be able to respond to the local needs. And this is a positive. The downside, of course, will be it will take time for these to be put in place. And of course, one thing many of you don't have right now is time. So I recognize and appreciate the frustration. However, they are in the pipeline. Funds are being released, and there will be funds available. It will be broader and more open this time than before. In addition to that, if you are self-employed, there is, of course, the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme, which was always in place, but they've just taken a slightly larger percentage now of your previous year's turnover than it was earlier. So one or two positives there. As I say, they are in the pipeline. They're not ready to be released yet, so please don't start badgering your local authorities. They'll send you back to the Growth Hub. But you can give the guys a call tomorrow, and they'll be happy to try and talk through bits and pieces. There's a question there with the LRG discretionary. I've got to get the terminology right. The LRSG closed, where several people share the premises in indoor markets, can share, trade, or apply for percentage of the grant, or grant only to the landlord. This is where the ARG, the Additional Restrictions Grant, that bit is where that could come into play. Now, I can't tell you definitively because it will depend on your local authority. As a college with commercial businesses, could we claim? LRSG, if you have a rateable value, rateable property, then yes. Assuming you've been forced to close. Again, those are the criteria. You need to be forced to close, and you need to be in a rateable property in order for LRSG. Okay. I'm sure there'll be a lot more questions on this, but we were here primarily for the guidance today, but I wanted to make sure that those questions were covered. By all means, give the Growth Hub helpline a call, 03333 602 300. We've got some polls for you to complete, so we'll just have those two polls pop up. I'm going to ask you to fill those in whilst we're currently working through this now. So please do fill in the questions here, and we'll gather that information. it is an unfolding situation. Appreciate that there's a tremendous amount of frustration and anxiety around these enforced closures. We deal with businesses such as yourselves on a daily basis. And we've handled something like 10,000 calls at the Growth Hub since it started back in March. And we understand the pressures that you're under. So please be assured that all of us are on the same side here. We are trying to make sure that we get clarity for the guidance as quickly as possible. The links to the trading standards advice line was published at the top of the live chat. So I think all that's really left for me to do now is to say thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen, for your contribution. This has been really, really useful. I think have we had both live polls done there? I think we've got one more to go, haven't we, about future? Oh, they're both on there. So 2 questions in one, that'll be why. Okay. So thank you very much indeed to Nathan and to Duncan for your time and your patience. I appreciate you are in a difficult position as well. And obviously we will continue to share knowledge with you all. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Don't forget, this recording will be passed on to a link. Will be passed on to you via a link later on. But for now, thank you very much indeed and have a very good evening. Thank you.